And we're live. Hello, hello. Hello, everybody in the audience. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. And today I have with me in the studio my friend Ada from
Hello.
Different Voice. And she is joining us from the UK. Are you in London? Actually,
Yes.
where are you exactly? Yeah, you're in London.
So I live in London now, but my home is Birmingham. I think you guys have a Birmingham there as well in America.
Alabama.
Yeah, Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
And here we have Birmingham as well, which is actually the second largest city. Arguably, people argue about this a lot, but it's the second largest in the UK.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So today, what should we talk about? We were just before we came on, everybody. And if you're joining us on the replay, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started very quickly, I just want to make sure that you know my guest has her own YouTube channel. And it's the same right as your Instagram, right? So you have
Yeah.
Instagram
Mm-hmm.
and YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I think, are you still doing more on Instagram as far as putting up videos, or is it about equal?
Yeah, so now I'm writing more actually. So I haven't been doing my first love, which is videos, because I love that kind of. I want people to see who's talking. I'm not shy about what I say, but now I am writing a lot more just because I feel with writing I can express myself sort of wider, if that makes sense.
Sure.
The video is kind of, what you say and then how people interpret it and things like that.
Right.
Whereas I think writing with the arts, and it's more of an art, isn't it? So yeah, but everywhere, I'm Different Voice X on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And where are you publishing your writing?
So my website. So
okay.
Yeah, I've just
is that this? What is tell me the website address so I can tell people.
Thank you. So it's differentvoice.uk. So that's just differentvoice.uk. And that's the new home of my blogs, some videos, my podcasts as well. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
No problem. I want everybody to be able to go find you. Mm-hmm. If you have not seen any of these that we've done before, we've done some live streams before, but also Ada has content of her own, especially, like I said, on YouTube and Instagram. And the thing that stands out to me is she has a very clear, honest voice. It's unafraid. So what sort of drew me to you as a friend and everything else is like my people, so like somebody who I can really relate to, because you just lay it on the line. Like, I'm not afraid to tell you what I think. As long as I know I'm being honest and true, and there it is. Here's the real you. And I really value that. So, and I love the perspective that you bring to all of our conversations, because you're in the UK, I'm in the US, and yet our different countries are facing some similar cultural issues, but from a different angle, it seems. It's like they're being explained a little differently. Mm-hmm. And one of the ones I wanted to ask you about is, like, with critical race theory, we've talked about it a lot together on this channel, but I don't think and a lot more time has gone by. So I don't think we've ever really explored how it gets explained, or even does it get explained in the UK? Are they admitting that they're teaching elements of it, or are they denying it? And when they do teach it or talk about it, is it sort of using like historical justification, or how do they justify it? In this country, it's, well, slavery, right? It all goes back to, like, because of the legacy of slavery, et cetera, et cetera. How is it explained in the UK, where you don't have that particular legacy?
First of all, they're not blatantly sort of pushing it out in, let's say, in schools or in society like they are in the US.
Oh, okay.
In the US, I think, the racial divide is quite, or can I say the racial divisions are more split than here in the UK. The UK, I always say, is kind of a place where everyone kind of already tiptoes around each other. even without any racial, tensions and things like that. It's a very safe place, if that makes sense. Like, everyone is safe about what they say. No one wants any trouble. Everyone wants to be comfortable. So with critical race theory, it's going to be very difficult to sort of outright push it out in schools, because parents will not allow that, full stop. And like you said, the history is a little bit different. I mean, Britain, its history really is more colonization. They were involved in the slave trade, but they weren't so directly involved. A debate I had one time, that my opponent was like, they made it in such a way that they didn't get their hands so dirty, but they were still kind of heavily involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have things like the Windrush. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Mm-mm.
That's another kind of sort of racial tension history we've had, but more with Caribbean side.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and there has been racism in this country, not segregation in terms of laws and things, just more discrimination and people not being able to, work and things like that and the other. So it hasn't been illegal. Racism per se has never been legal in this country. I can't say it was legal in America, but there were racist policies. Does that make sense? So
like Jim Crow and segregation
exactly.
in the South and so forth, but you never had that. So
we've never had that. And in a way, that's almost left a worse legacy in a sense, because we almost don't know what the problem is. It's like people feel, okay, we're oppressed, we're oppressed. And the thing is, any incident involving race that happens in America, even though technically we do not have the same exact situations, we're so quick and hungry to jump on it, because it's like, we don't know what we're really fighting for. So we jump on the back of, let's say, America, well, it's mostly America. For example, the George Floyd incident, policing in the UK, it's relatively better. I mean, our police officers don't have guns. So it's like screaming police brutality and oppression. It's not the same at all in America, So I'm saying all that to say that it's not blatant. It's basically under the surface, maybe community groups trying to push it or talk about it, but definitely not in schools and definitely not in mainstream media as such here.
Got it. Okay. So it's just not, if it's there, it's kind of more in the psyches of individual people who
groups. Yeah.
Right. Who sort of see it happening in the United States and kind of want a piece of that action, if you will, in some way, like, wait, I'm oppressed too, or, we need to worry about oppressed people. But what about the colonization component? Do people bring that up as far as, because there's critical race theory and then there's just these sort of woke ideas where you have let's decolonize this or that, or have there been any movements towards sort of, for example, like removing statues or removing artwork or anything like that in England? Because I know in Canada, they're tearing down Victoria's statue.
Yes.
in British Columbia, tore it down.
Yes.
They tore down Captain Cook and threw him in the ocean.
Yes, definitely. Oh, in terms of statues, for some reason, the short answer is yes, with things like statues. And for me, that does not make sense at all. I don't want to sound maybe condescending or insensitive. For example, me personally, a statue doesn't mean anything to me in the sense of, because I read an article once, we have a statue, or had a statue in a small town called Bristol. Now, Bristol in the UK actually is one, if not the main port where slaves were being shipped in and out in the UK. Very small city. That's where iron and steel was sent out from the UK and slaves were kind of brought in. So there's a statue there, or was a statue there of someone called, I believe, Edward Colson or something. And that was by mob rule, that was basically tipped over and thrown in the sea, or river, shall I say.
Did they give a reason? Or is it
Yeah, yeah,
just because he was involved in some
exactly.
tertiary way?
He was involved in, he was basically a slave trader. And the thing is, I read an article of a girl, a black girl, and it was really traumatizing to her that this statue remained there until now. And she was saying, how am I able to move forward? How am I able to have a good mindset, a good aura, she used as well, if that's still there? And I'm thinking, but really, what bearing does a metal thing, like, seriously, just by passing that every day, you feel that you're reminded of horrors that you were never even physically part of, you
For
know?
me, it would be more like I'd be walking by going, na 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 na. Like I would look at it totally differently. Like there's this metal likeness of some long dead person, and my existence as a free person, it would be almost an affront to them. So to me, it would be, I don't know, like I just would flip it around a little differently. Like,
But that's the
yeah,
truth. And like I said, look, I don't want to be insensitive. If it really bothers some people, then there is a way, there is a process to see how things can change.
sure.
But for it to bother you so much that you're saying that this could be a reason why you are not where you need to be in life, that's just a bit ludicrous, isn't it? That's just finding a scapegoat where the responsibility, or shall I say the accountability, should be on yourself.
Right.
You know. And then there was another statue that they wanted to topple as well, of someone who was, I want to tell this story because it really opened my eyes in the way some people think. And, they talk about whitewashing of history, right? But it's so funny when you dig deeper and find out the truths and the realities of what really happened in that time. It's like either people don't know or they don't want to know. Because we've been connected for a while, and I'm African by birth, and I am curious, very, very curious, as to the involvement, or let's say the lack of willingness or evidence to stop the slave trade from the parts of the Africans, because I'm African. So that's where my curiosity lies. I always liken it to, let's say I'm adopted, I am more concerned with my real parents who gave me up and why, than my adopted parents who took me however they took me.
It makes perfect sense. Yeah. And when you said about the whitewashing of history, I'm sort of like, okay, can we talk about that? Can we talk about all the parts of history, like the one that you mentioned? And there are stories of all the million, I think there were over 1 million white slaves in particular from Europe that were traded all over the world when, when it was the Ottoman Empire. And so I don't think that most people who are pushing these ideas either know that history or want to know it. I don't think they know. I honestly don't think they were ever educated about it.
Yeah.
And because even I wasn't, even at my age. So I'm 55, and when I went to school, we learned all about slavery. We learned all about Tulsa. We learned about all the history they claim we haven't learned about. We
Yeah.
learned.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what I didn't learn is I did not learn that part of European history. And I certainly didn't learn, anything about African history. I didn't learn anything about that side of, what you're talking about. I didn't learn about the Ottoman Empire. I didn't learn about white slavery. I didn't learn about just worldwide slavery. The only other thing with the connection to the Holocaust, obviously, I learned about that. And we did learn something today's kids don't learn. We learned about communism. That was a big, big deal because when I was in elementary school, we were still in Vietnam. We were just, kind of finishing up, pulling out completely Vietnam. And so communism was still a big deal. Plus, I lived through the Cold War. So we had duck and cover drills in the hallway. And,
Wow.
the specter of communism was like the communists are, Red Dawn, this is bad. And they went to great lengths to explain to us why it was so scary and why it was so dangerous. You still had East Bloc countries. But that stopped. I feel like that must have stopped in probably 1989, 1990 when the wall came down. It's almost like, oh, we don't have to teach that anymore. They just stopped.
Yeah.
And So, but you're right. There's a whole section of history that I don't think it's whitewashed. I think it's more like sanitized for purpose.
Yeah.
So whatever the particular purpose is of the people doing the teaching today, they kind of clean up the parts they don't want you to look at, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I mean, it's all for a purpose, like you said. And the reason, I mean, I never really knew really the things I know in terms of Africans' involvement in slavery. I never really knew, but because I am a type of person who always, no matter what you tell me, I must know all the sides of it. So because I'm naturally curious, that's what drove me to that. And also a very, let's say, personal reason. When I lived in Nigeria, we lived very well. We lived, in fact, I always say I lived better than I do here, because the thing with Nigeria is that when you're rich, you're really rich. You know, there's not so much middle class as such. It's
Right.
you're rich or you're poor. It's been 20 something years I've been there, but that's how I remember it. Whereas in the UK, I don't know how it is in America, but I'll talk about the UK. It's you're rich, then it's kind of the middle class, and the working class, then you're poor. But the middle class and the working class, you all kind of have the same things, you know. You all kind of get the similar wages depending where you live, geography in London, whatever, or outside of London. But in Nigeria, there is a big divide. So we lived very well, and we had what we call house help, housemaids, whatever. And my friends had too. But some of them, not ours, but they were treated really badly sometimes. And these are not slaves. We would never call them slaves. They wouldn't really get paid. They would basically do all our housework, and we'll give them a place to live, right? And some of these people were treated, I mean, when I say treated badly, I mean beaten, you know, punished if they did something wrong. So because I had that experience growing up, and I come to England and I'm hearing white people slaving, white people, I was like, but I lived in Africa and I've seen some barbaric, harsh, slave-like things too. So this narrative that we hear here in the UK, and I know you hear there in the US, that literally I've heard white people invented slavery because of racism. And those 2 points are wrong, which we can talk about later. White people invented slavery because of racism. Those 2 clauses are completely wrong, right? But we can touch on that. So when I was hearing all this, I was like, something isn't adding up. And that's what made me dig deep into my own history. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah.
So it does sound like it's very different. And because here, you know, it's if we were to raise the point that you just made, like if I were to say, well, just out of curiosity, you know, if I weren't antagonistic, if I just said, just out of curiosity, have you ever stopped to wonder why the people of Africa, who were told by some of the liberationists and people like that were seafaring people, came before Columbus, we're told. They really discovered America, but left it in peace because they're peaceful people. I mean, I watched a guy debating somebody about critical race theory who literally believed that. He's one of the people who believes that there were Africans here way before Columbus and all this kind of stuff. They're seafaring. They came all the way here. Okay. Well, if that's true, why did they come rescue the slaves? I mean, so even if, never mind the part about how did they give them up? Mm-hmm. Okay. How did that occur? It's not, you know, but why didn't anyone, not just from Africa, but from any other country say, let's go liberate all of these people in horrific bondage, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever paused to think, if I even asked that question, it would be, I mean, hellfire. Like I could not possibly get away with asking that question.
Yeah.
I'm doing it here, but you know, like if I were in person, I might not live to see the other end of the day.
No, I will talk about why I even brought this up, because it relates to a statue and something I found out. But I just want to say it's a very sensitive issue for generally, you know, because Because of two things, because there was involvement from Africa, or I keep saying Africa, but from certain
The
parts
whole
of
continent,
Africa.
right? It's a pretty
Yeah,
big continent,
it
right?
is a continent, so we can be more specific. Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and so on and so on. There was involvement in them, but also there's many theories, and I've thought about this myself. The reason why it's not so much talked about is from, let's say, in the Black community and Africans, is because they maybe also didn't know how barbaric it will, they didn't know what it will turn into. Because
I see.
I will
Okay.
be very honest with you, I don't think it started because of slavery, because of racism. But I will be a fool to say that racism didn't come out of it, because from that did come the segregation and the Jim Crow and things like that in your country,
Sure.
and other things, here.
Well, I mean, okay, let's examine that, because I can see, as you've just pointed out, in where you were living, where you were growing up, the culture to this day is sort of like, well, if I give you a place to live and something to eat and so forth, then you work for me, you do these things. Okay, I don't pay you, you do the stuff.
Mhm,
Now, they're theoretically free to leave, right? I mean, they can just kind of go. They just won't have another place to live unless
mhm,
they find another place. Okay. So the difference being, of course, that the slaves were treated as literal property that were bought and
mhm,
sold as property, chattel slavery. So that
mhm.
carries with it something extra, like that when you're reduced, you're dehumanized, you're reduced to a level of an animal. And that's just horrific. Okay.
Yes.
But I can see what you're saying about maybe on that side of the ocean, they were thinking, what maybe maybe some people committed crimes. Maybe they were in a war and they lost the war.
It
I
wasn't
mean,
maybe, that was the case. So
okay.
it first started off with prisoners of war. It started off with people who were criminals, who owed money. It started off like that. So it wasn't just anyone from Africa,
Yeah.
which, please don't forget what you're saying, but this needs to be clear. It
Yeah.
started off, if I can just be, I'm very candid. I can't help it. I'm straight to the
No,
point.
that's
But
why that's why I love you, because I'm like,
I
yes,
help it. I
please.
try.
Yeah.
But it started off, let's say, with the rejects of their society, of the African society. It started off with that. And whatever it turned to, we can talk about that. But let's see what it started off with.
Sure.
Then it went on to, we are seeing that if we are giving our people, because African people, they're not stupid. We are not stupid. And people need to stop thinking this.
Yeah.
We're not, we know exactly what we do until today. This bigotry of low expectations just eats my brain. I hate it. So they started to realize, wow, as I am sending my people, we are getting iron, we are getting brass, we are getting fancy ornaments. I read some of the things that they were getting in exchange, and it's like, of course, at that time, whatever, value is different, but it's just such trivial things.
Right.
So they were seeing that it was lucrative,
Sure.
and to the point that diplomats, which brings me to this statue that they wanted to take down in England, I forgot his name. It's either Thomas something, or it's with a T. I can't remember. I always try to go back and find it, and I can't. But anyway, they wanted to take him down because he was involved in the slave trade. And that's the problem with mainstream. Involved in the slave trade, what do you automatically think? Slave trader, this and that. But when you dig deeper, you will see that he was actually not for it. What was happening at that time? So he was involved, but not the way the mainstream paints. So what was happening at that time in the
Edward Colston?
No, that's the
Oh.
Bristol one.
Oh, bro, that's the Bristol one. So this was in a different location.
Yeah, he's maybe Google Hyde Park.
Hyde Park. Okay.
Yeah, Hyde. I'm sure it's somewhere near there.
Okay. But anyway, go continue. I'm listening.
Yeah. So this guy, he was involved in the parliament somehow. You know, the parliament in Britain, right? Where decisions are made. And in parliament at that time, Deb, parliament was debating on how to stop slave trade.
Yeah.
Because they were saying, if we don't stop it now and these people rise up, they are going to kill us all, basically. We need to stop it. This isn't good. So you had the Conservative Party here saying, well, not really, we don't want to. Then you had the other party saying, well, blah, 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 we should. So what happened is 2 diplomats were sent from the UK, from England, from the slave country, from the colonists, to Benin. Okay, Benin, Benin, Nigeria. Yeah. I was born in Benin. I was born there. To stop the slave trade. The king at that time was called King Gezo. He said, no, we are not going to stop this. African, he said, we're not going to stop this because this is good for security. We're getting the weapons. This is good for our finances. This is good. Right? Twice Britain went to Africa to stop it. They said no. Then you have America fighting civil wars to stop slavery. So what the heck? What Britain is arguing in Parliament to stop slavery. America is fighting a war to stop slavery. What is Africa doing? What are they doing? That's my point.
And the racism that came about in America, I think, was a function of 2 things primarily. Christianity. Well, we have to justify owning humans. How are we going to justify owning humans? Because that's obviously, it's pretty against the Bible, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to change these humans into, well, it's different. They're not really, we kind of rationalize this. Otherwise we're, committing this horrible sin. Of course, abolitionists were perfectly consistent in saying, no, you can't rationalize it. It's evil. But there were people whose livelihoods depend on it. And they came up with this gross rationalization, going so far sometimes to reinterpret whole sections of the Bible and even write treatises on how it really was okay, which is sickening to me, but they did. That's first thing. Second thing was, so it wasn't Christianity that did it, was the attempt to remain consistent with Christianity that was doing it. And that creates this sort of race thing. Right. The second thing is that if you have free labor, slave labor, then poor white people who don't own land and don't own lots of property what are they going to do? They're not very marketable. Their labor against free. Like, how do you sell your labor against free? What do you have to trade? And so that creates a lot of resentment and animosity and feelings of bitterness because that you're not going to get those jobs. Now, having said that, I also have read stories about people in the South who said, all right, I'm going to hire free white men and so forth to only free to come and work on my sugar plantation or whatever. And there were, but at a certain point in history, they were also not the most savory of people. And they would be late or they wouldn't show up or they would say, okay, now I'm here and I've done half the job, pay me double to do the rest of the job. So they made it more difficult for the plantation owner to get the job done without all kinds of delays. And it would end up costing more because the argument was it costs more for a slave than for a free man, because even though you don't pay the slave, they fed them well, they took care of them, all these kind of things. It's still slavery. Don't hear me as defending slavery.
Of course.
But you had extremely reliable labor, but you had to keep them healthy. You had to make sure and so forth. The free person, you didn't have to feed them. You didn't have to house them. You didn't have to take care of any medical issues they had or anything like that. They just pay them for the day labor and they're done. But this one story that was written about, I don't know, at the time, the guy said, forget it. I'm never doing it again because it costs me more to try to hire these day laborers because in the end, they held me up for money. Then they walked off the job and the product rotted. I couldn't get it to market in time and it rotted. And I was out, $10,000 or some crazy amount of money. I'm never doing it again. So in that case, you have all kinds of different incentives, economic incentives, sort of this religious justification, but it's so complicated and it's so nuanced. And people say, racism. I'm like, yes, but the racism wasn't a precursor to the slavery. It came after the slavery to justify different behaviors that were incentivized by most likely the economic attachment to the slavery. Because to your point, I mean, then what was the excuse in Africa? They obviously weren't racist, right?
Yeah.
Not, so I think that's the part that gets misrepresented all the time. And of
Exactly.
course, in the North, where they were not economically dependent, there were slaves in the North, but they weren't economically dependent upon them. So it
Mm-hmm.
was easier to frown upon it. It was easier to look down your nose at your neighbor if they owned a slave, and it was done away with a lot sooner. But not in the South, because you had the entire economy was dependent on it. And I just wish they taught history in that more nuanced way, not to forgive anything, not
Yeah.
to make excuses, but simply to say, you know, this is the true story. This is
Mm-hmm.
the whole story. Make of it what you will. And then you decide if you live in a country that is, on balance, a moral, ethical country because it was always trying to do better. And there were, that the majority of people were trying to push and push for better. Just
Mm-hmm.
because there are people who are like, nah, we like it, it's good, doesn't mean the country,
That's the
right?
point.
It's like, are you consistently moving in a forward direction? Are you consistently trying to do better and not just going, no, we're good, this is fine? And as you said, here and in Great Britain, they were trying to do better, not consistently all that well, but it, if you look at world history, a far sight better than any other place. And then right now we have countries in Africa that still, Libya, Sudan, I think Somalia, well, I don't know about Somalia, but I mean, I know Sudan has an issue.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there are child soldiers, there are kids there are people pressed into service in the mines.
Mm-hmm.
It's
This is the point. It's the lack of nuance, it's the lack of balance. And I just talked about equality on Instagram just now, and just as you're speaking, I'm thinking to myself, why is it that because I basically read a caption from a lady, and she was a black lady. It's so funny. People don't like when I say black or white, but it's what they are.
what are you supposed to say?
Alien or thing. I say what it is because I get comments like, oh, you shouldn't say that because that's causing a divide. But the thing is, this is what they are saying. And I'm trying to break this pattern. I'm trying to interrupt this pattern. But anyway, black lady, it was a big rant about white people and white supremacy, but the same things. But the thing that got me, that always gets me, is when she said, they need to give us, they as in the white person, white man, they need to give us an equal playing field for us to be equal. And the first thing I thought to myself is, why doesn't she see herself as equal? Well, what's the gap? Because me personally, I have never seen myself as unequal, especially because I'm black. Maybe I felt inexperienced, or things like, but not because I'm of my skin color. I just never have. I can be the only black person in the room. I can be the only woman in the room. I haven't felt that. We're not talking about
Well,
sexual gender. We're talking about race. I'll stick with race.
but you know what? Whenever I hear people talk like that, what immediately comes to mind is how provincial it sounds and how ignorant. And what I mean by that is, um if you have this concept of I'm not equal to someone else, there's the part that you mentioned of like, why don't you feel you're equal? Why are you putting yourself here? But also, what playing field is it that you imagine white people start on? It's kind of like that routine that Eddie Murphy did a long time ago on Saturday Night Live, where he sort of put on white face and, went around. It was a parody where people were like, oh, here, you take it as free for you because, you're
Yes.
white. And then like the last black person gets off the bus and everybody cheers and has a party. I mean,
Yes.
I sometimes think that there are people who imagine that there's this magical place called like, I don't
White
know,
man.
Whitopia. And, like we all sort of secretly hatch out of eggs there or something. And, like they were on this like higher plane and everything is just handed. Here's your privilege in a box. And I wonder, have they ever seen like even a documentary about Appalachia in America? Have they ever seen poor white people in, for example, upstate New York?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
I lived in a part of the western part of Connecticut for a while in the woods, and was right near a part of New York State called Dutchess County. Very poor, very, very impoverished. And I mean, I really don't think that some of these people have the first clue what poverty looks like. And yet they'll say things like white trash. And it's like, okay,
Yes,
so you obviously know that there are people who live in trailer parks and,
yes,
you know, next to the meth lab who, you
yes,
know, like they're for 6 generations running, they have no teeth, whatever. I mean, you know, nobody reads.
yes,
Everybody's an alcoholic. And yet they'll say, well, that person has privilege. And
yes.
it's kind of like, I don't know what planet you're living on, but that's just not how it works. So when I hear people say things like, "Well, we need a level playing field," I'm like, which of the thousands of levels would you like to start on?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because there isn't one. There's not like white playing field. That
There
doesn't
isn't.
exist.
It doesn't exist. And the thing is, for me, I'm going to say something very cliche. Look, and I don't care if it's cliche because this is why I do well when I get my hands on something. The level playing field for me is that I'm alive, like you're alive.
Right.
It's that I have 2 hands like you have 2 hands. I have a brain like you have a brain. I have 2 legs like you have. That's my level playing field.
Right.
That's it. You
Right.
know? And there's, like you said, with all due respect, I don't need to say this, you know it already, but there's nothing you have that I don't see your
It's true.
skin color. And you know what? Let's play the devil. Let's give the benefit of the doubt. Even if your skin color has a pass in some things in society, whatever, I can guarantee you so will mine in some other areas. Like, do you know what? If we want to play that game, we can play that game.
And nobody wants to talk about that either, especially in today's climate. And I have been told to my face in 2012, I had to go get a job. I'd been at home for 10 years because I was married, I had small children, I was homeschooling, and then I was separated and I was getting a divorce. So I had to go try to work. But at this point, I was in my, you know, mid 40s and I hadn't worked in a business or anything for 12 years. I've been home for 10. And I thought, well, I'll go put myself out for like temp work, secretarial, you know, go sign up with the recruiters to just, I mean, I had tons of office skills and
Mhm,
I was waiting to see if I could get my teaching credentials again, but there was a
mhm,
whole paperwork process. So I
mhm,
went to sign up with all of the agencies in my city to
mhm,
just say, hey, here's my typing speed. I type very fast. I do all these things. And I have a
mhm,
college degree, I have a master's degree, whatever. And I was expecting to hear you're overqualified. So I did hear that. But then I did not expect to hear, and it was really one person out of all of them who told me the truth. And I should mention that every single one of the recruiters, the women in charge of the office I went to speak with, every single one was Black. Every single person who was sort of in charge of interviewing me. So the person who held my life in their hands as far as whether they were going to send my resume anywhere didn't look like me. Doesn't phase me. I'm like, okay, whatever. You know, I live in the South. That's actually very common. So then one actually said, I said, I was so exasperated. I said, you're like the 6th office I've been to, and you're telling me you're overqualified, et cetera. I said, I don't care. Like, I just need to work. So there must be something. There must be some place you can send me just for an interview. Can you just send me on the interview? Just give me a chance, you know? And she said, look, I only get paid, our company only gets paid if we place somebody. So I'm incentivized to send people they're looking for. And she said, I'll just be straight with you. She said, they're not looking for you. And I said, well, you know, why? What is it? And she said, they have diversity quotas to meet and they're not going to hire you. They just,
really,
you know, she basically said, you are the wrong color. Like, she didn't say those words, but she's like, they
really.
have quotas to meet. They're pushing for diversity and you are not going to help them get there. So the likelihood they're going to choose you from the other pile of resumes that I have here is nil.
Wow.
So I'm not going to send you because then I'm not going to get paid. And there went that. So I was actually thanked her. She didn't
Mhm,
say it with malice. She wasn't being rude. She wasn't like, nobody wants you. She was like, I'm not going to get paid if I send you.
mhm,
I need to send people. I need to up the chance that I'm going to get paid. So I have a stack of resumes that are what they ask for. What they ask for is diversity candidates,
mhm,
and you're not diverse. And so that was the end of that search, because I just realized I was, banging my head against a brick wall. But
Yeah.
when I mention that to people, they're like, "Oh, that doesn't happen. That never happened." I'm like, but it does. It actually does.
Mm-hmm.
And we know also that in terms of college admissions and so forth, if you put down, people have tried it. They've put down like African American, or they put down other things just to see. There was an Indian guy who did this from India.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
for medical school, he shaved his head
Mm-hmm.
so that he looked black as opposed to Indian. Somehow, with having his hair being straight, it looked better if he was bald.
Yeah.
And he got in as a black man where he had
Wow.
not gotten in as
Mm-hmm.
as an East Asian. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
figure,
it's
or
privilege.
West Asian, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So,
like I forgot what I was going to say now, but the thing is, what were we saying?
well, that was to your point about how in some settings, maybe my race carries me somewhere, and in
Yeah.
others,
Yes,
yours will help
yes,
you.
yes. And the thing is, people call me self-hating because of the ideas that I have, right? But when I listen to some Black people speak, I really feel that they don't have a strong sense of self. I hear, going back to what you said, okay, they can talk about trailer trash and things like that. I heard a Black girl, actually, she was very young, and the way she was speaking, she sounded so freaking smart. But then she said this. She was an activist. She was talking about inequalities, and I really was feeling what she was saying until she said, the thing that white people don't understand, I swear down, this is her exact words. What white people don't understand is that even when they have nothing, they still have their white skin. And
But
I
they
thought,
call you self-hating.
and I thought to myself, so this is what white privilege is about then. It's like, and it's okay to say, like, do you adore the white skin? Like, do you see the white skin as something so valuable? Then even though you are, let's say, Obama's daughter, you still have it worse technically than a man living in the slums that's white. Because even though he's in the slums, well, he's still white.
It doesn't even make sense. Like we
It just
burn,
doesn't
we
make
got to put
sense.
sunscreen like all over. We burn in the sun. I don't know. I'll be
Not
honest.
really.
I'll
Yeah.
be honest. My education as a person growing up in what we used to call colorblind America. Now I've heard a new term that I prefer, color indifferent America. Okay. Cause honestly, I was just indifferent. I
Yeah.
noticed it, but it was like, I don't care. Color irrelevant America. Um,
Exactly.
my education into that environment was so successful. It was done so thoroughly that I never I read something today on Twitter. It was so perfect, where the point was made that people like me, whatever, were raised that way, especially post Martin Luther King, post civil rights. And my dad absolutely idolized Martin Luther King Jr. So my father was a lawyer and he was fairly liberal and so forth. And he just thought that, he was absolutely brilliant. And so I was raised that way. And so were a lot of other people in my generation. We were raised to just be like, yeah, whatever. We're just one big happy American family.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so complete that now people say, well, that's your privilege that you haven't had to be conscious of your race. I'm like, it's an achievement to not be, for human beings, not for me personally, but for
Mm-hmm.
human beings to leave behind sort of tribalistic tendencies, racial essentialism and all these kinds of regressive ideas that are not what anyone would call progressive. Like they're not forward thinking. They're not conducive to human survival and a pluralistic, open society with full of all kinds of individual liberty. This is not a privilege.
Yeah.
This is something you ought to be going, good on you. I want to go there too. Like, it's and I didn't do it. Like I didn't like climb a mountain, but my parents did.
Mm-hmm.
My parents grew up in a different America and they took pains to say, not my kids, right?
Exactly.
And
Mm-hmm.
then, I did not my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And and now it's like, oh, well, you never had to think about it. And I'm like, actually, I did. I have had to think about it. I just didn't think about it the way maybe you think I should have thought about it. In other words, when we would sit in class and learn about slavery, I'm the person, and people look like me. We're the ones going, ooh, people look like me did that. Like, we already felt that. We don't need a DEI trainer to say to a kid, you know, bad white people. You're already, if you recognize yourself in the baddie, you know, you see like the bad people look like you, you're already kind of going, that sucks. You know, I mean, it's kind of in your mind. I mean, I remember as a child thinking to myself, like, no lie. And I bet a lot of people, if they were honest with themselves, I'd say, okay, like, all my relatives lived in New York City. All of them came after the Civil War. They were Jewish. Okay. Whew, I didn't participate in that. Like, I'm not kidding. You go through this like mental process where, like, did my relatives participate? Did they not participate? I was pretty psyched they didn't. Still didn't love the fact that people who look like me did it, and was, you know, absolutely dedicated to making sure that I would never think that way. My children would never think that way. And that this would be this thing of the far distant past that would never be repeated, not on my watch. Right.
Yeah.
And why this is now considered a privilege, it's kind of like, no, this is what progress looks like. You really want to go backwards? You want people to start being conscious? Because I promise you, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't. No, you really don't. And so when somebody wrote that on Twitter, I wish I could find it because it was so well said. I think it's unfortunate that somebody go, it's in the skin. And then when you say to them, it's like, oh, so it's in the skin. Then they, in this country anyway, what they're saying now is, no, it's in the culture.
Right.
So it's like they talk out both sides of their mouth. 1 minute, it's the guy in that homeless shelter who's white, has it over the billionaire who's black because of the white skin. And then you say, so it's the skin? No, it's the culture. What?
Doesn't make sense.
It's like, pick one. You can't have both.
Exactly. There's too much contradictions and there's too much incoherence in a lot of arguments in terms of race. And just before we move on, my thought is, for true equality to happen, in my opinion, it wouldn't cause equality as such, but it will cause people to see that they are equal. And I will try and explain it better or clearer. You have to teach all sides of history. The reason I don't feel less than, or I don't feel oppressed, is because I know that Europeans, white people, whatever, have done barbaric things. And I know that Black people have done barbaric things. So people
have done barbaric things. Humankind.
Human beings. So in the same way I'm capable of much good, I'm capable of much evil. Because my people have shown me that. But the only reason why people in the UK feel oppressed, though this country I call almost a free country because so many things are free in this country. That's why we have storms and floods of immigration here. Our NHS is free. You get something called benefits, which I think in America you call it welfare. But here is kind of, you know, anyone can be on it kind of thing.
Right.
So though they live in a great, free, safe country, you know, very organized, if I can say, you know, compared to many countries, they can still say that they're oppressed. And the reason they do that is because they don't know their history, ironically. They don't know their history. They see themselves as this weak, defenseless, passive group of people. And like you said, it's a good time for me to mention this. They talk out of both sides of their mouths. Because on the one hand, they're the weak, defenseless, whatever. On the other hand, they're kings and queens and powerful royalty, gods, and so on and so on.
Like I said, seafaring, beat Columbus here. You know, they left it untouched because they're so peaceful. It wasn't in their nature, this guy said. It wasn't in their nature to colonize. And I was just like, wow, that's so convenient.
It's a stretch. It's a stretch, isn't it? It's a stretch that they believe these things themselves. And look, when I talk like this, it's not putting my country down, my continent down, whatever. It's bringing truth. because this is why I am who I am today and why I have what I have. Because I don't see myself as less than. I know the strength of my people, if I could say, so I don't feel weak at all. And I think people need to understand that they are truly equal. Right. If you think that white people are the oppressors, you are truly equal. We're all the same.
Well, you're basically saying someone is capable of oppressing me simply by their existence in the same room. That if that's not supremacy, I don't know what it is. Like, what would you call that? Like the person, you're just two people in a room, just occupying space. And if you're saying I feel trauma and I feel unsafe, and I'm like 5'1", and what am I going to do to you? Really, it's just crazy.
After this, I'm going to send you an article. It's called "The Reason Why Minorities." Maybe you've read it. The reason why minorities and white Americans can't get along. If you haven't read it, I beg you, even if you can now, Google it. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. The white rage is like a ticking time. It's just so full on. It's full on. Like we, or let's say Black people or minorities in America, are living in fear, in torment, just for existing. And it's all this imaginary, and I use that word, and I understand people have faced specific incidents that have traumatized them in relation to racism, but to say that I'm just living in fear of what the next white person can do to me.
Do you believe them? Do you believe them, or do you think it's kind of like a fashion? What I mean by that is, there are people who, for a variety of reasons, is kind of like a melodrama, like a histrionic personality disorder, where, I get mileage, I get attention, I get sympathy, I get whatever, almost like hypochondria, except your racial fear. And you'll get attention for that, whereas you're not going to get any praise or attention for just being what you're doing. Used to be, like when I was growing up, if you were self-motivated, personally responsible, badass who said, independence is my superpower, you would get all good things. And people would just be like, you go. That was like the mentality. I don't know if it's a Gen X thing or what it was, but that was the mentality of kind of like, you're in charge of yourself and good on you, right? But today it's more like people are putting their mental illness in their profile. Like, I have bipolar disorder and PTSD and this and that, and my pronouns are, and I'm a victim and all this. And people are like, oh, you poor baby. And if you say, well, I'm just me and I'm an individual, racist, horrible, evil person, how could you do that? And it's inverted. It's like our values are upside down. And so I just have decided I think they're full of crap. I do. I'm sorry. I don't believe them. I don't believe them. I think people who are people who are really that afraid and that traumatized, they don't leave their house. Like they that's too uncomfortable to function. But I've known plenty of people. I've had some in my family who were histrionic and melodramatic, probably borderline.
Yes.
And those people are all the vapors. Oh, I'm so worried. But they're not. It's of affect. And it's a fashion.
It is. I'm in two minds. I believe some, just because at first I was like you. It was like, this is just bull. Like it just cannot be real. How can you develop these strong, real feelings of something that's not real? Just a thought you've had or something you've seen in the mainstream, and you've made
a mental illness.
Yes, yes. But from speaking really to some, they really feel like this. They really, really, really do. And one reason is because of what they've heard from family, especially family in, let's say, our culture, in the Black culture is so, it can be so toxic, and they might not even realize what they're doing, but this passing on, and they feel like it's their duty to warn. It's like a rite of passage. to warn your child of the white man. And it's like, okay, things have happened in the past, but it's like they must make it true today. And that's anyway a symptom, or can I say one of the effects of collective trauma anyway, because
Right.
there is that sense of, you always feel like there's a threat. So to maintain and preserve your community, you must keep that threat alive. They really do feel that they must always be on their guard because of the history that they've been taught, or shall I say the one-sidedness of history that they've been taught. So
Well, and it would
that's
seem
why I will say I do believe some. They really do believe what they're saying. Some know, but some really do.
well, I guess what I'm thinking of is the ones who have really made it. Like, in other words, they're very rich and they're very powerful, and they'll still say like, "Oh, this is traumatizing," and it's like, I'm sorry, I don't buy it. You're getting too much out of this for me to believe that you really feel like this. That's just my 2 cents. So now, as far as the component of the family training you that way, that does make a difference. Then now they're bringing it into the schools in this country. Of course, they're taking kids as young as 6 and telling them, be afraid, be very afraid. And that's going to get to you. And if you don't really ever step outside of your neighborhood, or you hang out mostly with people who agree with you, then your world is very small, your worldview is very small, and you don't have anything challenging you. And if the people who might challenge that idea right there in your classroom, your fellow classmates or their parents or somebody, if they're told to shut up, like they're censored or called names, then you really don't have any exposure to anything other than the party line. And the part that bothers me in this country is how inverted it all is. In other words, the people who claim to care, the people who claim to want to help children in particular, because that's what I focus on, are doing everything the opposite of what you would do, what any rational person would do, what any person who understands how children learn and think and grow and develop. They're doing the opposite of what you would do if you want kids to grow up feeling strong and full of self-esteem and empowerment and confidence, all the things they need to be successful. They're doing the opposite. And when someone like me speaks up and says that's going to hurt the child to tell them they're a victim all the time. Not to say people who look like you were victims, that's different. But you personally, when it's has no bearing on reality, that you're hurting that child. And then they say, you just don't want us to teach the truth. And so forth and so on. So even the people who sincerely want to help and I don't say help like, oh, come here, little pet, I want to help you. I'm talking about any child. It's not specific to Black children. It could even be, the white child who's told you're an oppressor is suffering just as much as the Black child is told you're a victim. They're both suffering together. That's the tragedy, is they're both there in the room together and yet apart. They're putting a wedge between them when they really could be helping each other and be best friends and all of this. And the teacher ought to be helping them both grow as individuals. And instead, it's kind of like, oh, I want to help you, and, oh, I want to help you be a better person, so they're not helping anyone.
Yeah.
Like, it's like how a narcissist says, I just want you to be a better person. I'm just trying to help you be a better person. And then you turn to the other person like, you need me because you're so helpless. No matter how you slice it, you're hurting someone.
Yeah.
And I can't, I get so frustrated and like tied up in knots because there feels like a wall between people who think like I do, and on the reality side of the wall, and people increasingly who think like they do, the postmodernists and the critical theorists, and the children they're kidnapping, and I can't get through. I can't get through. There's no avenue to get through. The media's taken over. The schools are taken over. You try to voice an opinion and you're told, shut up, you're a bad person. They are being told that the only reason in this country, I don't know how it is there, but in this country, that the only reason we are critical of critical race theory is it's this grand power grabbing conspiracy by our right wing politicians, which of course is total hogwash.
Yeah.
How in the UK,
It's the
surely
same.
it's the same.
It's the same. The thing is, nowadays, I was laughing about it the other day. It's like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe you're conservative, or are you? Do you have?
I'm a libertarian. I'm a live and let live person. I'm
Well,
not. I'm neither conservative nor liberal. I'm what you might call classically liberal.
Yes.
You're it's kind of like I leave you alone, you leave me alone, we're good.
Oh, I'm exactly the same then.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm a classic liberal.
Yeah, it's
but
just
but what I want to say is, it is similar here. Like I said, critical race theory is here, not just as much. They are trying to decolonize the curriculum. So what they're doing here, I don't know if they're doing it there. I haven't read it yet, but maybe you can let me know. Is that
bye Shakespeare?
Pretty much. So they're trying to add more, let's say, black and brown, authors or whatever, and that's not a problem. That's not a problem. But it's and you know what? Let me even say something that might shock you. It's not even a problem to even remove some, let's say, of the white authors. It's what they're saying as they're removing. These are the colonists. These are the racists. No, you can't. These people, whatever you think, have contributed greatly somehow to society, be it literature. There's another author that they're trying to cancel. I forgot her name now. They're trying to cancel her. But at the end of the day, she's the reason many children could read. You can say what you want about her writings. Does that make sense? So
totally.
It's like they don't want to. You want to tell me that because I like jumping. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, it's okay.
Everyone just stay with me. Okay, for example, let's say MLK. I love MLK, but he has had some red in his ledger. If that's
oh, for sure.
Yeah. So you want to tell me this is my problem, Deb? So, okay, you're going to remove all the bad white people. So you want to tell me that every single black and brown person you want to add is an angel, is clean. No, they are not. And look, there's nothing wrong. But this is my point. Going back to the beginning, we are all equal. We are all the same, capable of much good and much evil. Stop trying to paint this false lie, this false picture that one side is the helpless lamb, weak, and another side is a demon. It's just not true. And I don't like when people insult my intelligence, right? And that's why I can't allow things like, or even buy into things like critical race theory, which, by the way, says that everything a white person does is racist. And I'm sure this thing was created by a white person. So hence CRT is racist, right? So.
Well, critical theorists were racist. I mean, critical theorists, the original critical theorists and postmodernists were white. And not only were they white, but one of them, Foucault, was white and a pedophile. And his favorite thing were little brown boys in North Africa. That was his favorite thing that he liked. So, yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy is like, forget about it. But I too don't have a problem with people wanting to change the canon, if you will, like say, hey, time has marched on and lots of other people have written books and some of these have made their way into classic status.
Yes.
My definition of a classic is, does it cover themes that stand the test of time, timeless themes using, wonderful quality writing in terms of the style, in terms of the beauty of it, in terms of the construction, all of that, where 100 years from now, someone would still read it and say, this is relevant to life today, even if the particulars are anachronistic, like the clothes they wore and the food they ate, but the themes and the moral of the story or the lesson it teaches, whatever it's about, I can read Victor Hugo, and obviously every little particular about it is so different from how we live today, but it is the most soul enriching literature. Like, you read it and you go to another place, like you travel to another place. I mean, he's a man, he's living in, 19th century France, and I
Mm-hmm.
just can't relate in many ways, but the way that he writes, it's like, why I bother reading? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why would you bother reading if it doesn't just like elevate you to a place where you're like, this is why humans are not animals like this.
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, yes, there are plenty of writers who've come along since Shakespeare or whatever, and they're not all, they're not white. They're writing in English.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be, if you're studying English, they should at
Mm-hmm.
least have been writing in English, the
Mm-hmm.
English language. That's the whole point of it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, take a class in that language. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yes, by all means, let's add.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, I don't think to throw away Shakespeare is to deny a child, a student, um, access
Mm-hmm.
to history, access to timeless themes and information, and they should have that option.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, whether it should be required, I don't know. I think for certain courses, for example, if you're taking a course in that time period, it should be
Yeah.
required. But
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want to read that, then that's fine. I just don't think we should demonize
Yeah.
and say we're going to throw this out completely and do away with it, because now you're denying access.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're telling a student arbitrarily you shouldn't want this.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
the
that's
point.
that's wrong. I think that's wrong. It's not true, first of all. I mean, look, Wagner, notorious anti-Semite,
Mm-hmm.
okay, composer. Hitler, adored the guy, and he was pretty central to his views.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Jewish. I still love Wagner operas.
Mm-hmm.
Sue me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and people are like, how could you? And I'm like, because it's fantastic music and the performances are spectacular. And I like opera. Like, if I didn't like opera, it would be a different story, but I like opera. So I'm not going to cut myself off from that part of the genre because the guy was an ass. Like it's still
Exactly.
beautiful music.
And I
So
think that's the biggest problem nowadays in society. People are not able to sort of pick. For example, you're Jewish, you said, and then you can still appreciate some parts of his work.
yeah,
But nowadays,
he's dead.
yeah,
The work is still here.
yeah.
It's not like I'm paying him.
Nowadays, when you like something, when you appreciate a part of something, you are that thing.
Yeah, that's just not true.
I watched a video of a guy, I don't know who he is, it was just a random person, but what he said really made sense to me. He said he's not really conservative, he's libertarian as well, he's independent, whatever. And he has, sometimes he agrees with BLM, sometimes he doesn't. And he was saying to his followers, look, don't message me saying, well, a conservative quoted what you said. Like, I don't give a damn. Like, why can't people understand that just because you appreciate there's some things I appreciate and people be like, what, how, why, you? But that's what it comes down to. I am an individual.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't, not everything that you like or appreciate, it becomes part of your cell structure,
Or you
or
know.
you. Yeah. And we're seeing that in this country a lot with regard to everything from, COVID policy and vaccines
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm,
to, what kids should be learning in school and so forth. Because, for example, it's now to the point where it is assumed, it's
mm-hmm,
just automatically assumed by people high up in our government
mm-hmm.
that if you have not gotten the COVID vaccine or you have no intention of getting it, that you're making a political statement, as
Yes.
if there's no reason in the
Other
world,
reason.
no dozen other reasons maybe, what that you might want to wait, that you might not want to get it at all, not vaccinate your children. Like, there are so many reasons, none of which are anybody's business,
Mm-hmm.
because it's your body. I thought that we used to agree on that, but anyway, and now it's like the only reason you don't want this is politics, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
no, that, and it's taken for granted. And if it were just individuals walking around saying stupid things like that, I would just chalk it up to people are idiots. But when it's major news publications and the president of the United States and people like that, and the Dr. Fauci and all these people. Then he actually said, get over it. Get over it. He says, oh, that is so inspiring. I'm definitely going to run off and stick a needle in my arm. Thank you, Dr. Fauci. I mean, no. And this is how they're talking to people. It's gone beyond, I disagree with you, and here are the 10 reasons why, to you're a bad person because you disagree with me, and I now need to demonize you and shut you off from all discourse. And it's virtually everything. It's everything.
It's a method of control, even going back to teaching children, whether they're white, they're an oppressor, whether they're black, they're being oppressed. It's a way to control that child from young, because then you are telling them what they think. So they are always going to be eating off your hands of what to think next. Okay, you're telling me I'm oppressed. Okay, what next? Can you tell me about myself?
Yeah, really, please fill me in. Tell me all about my life.
Tell me all about my life. I have an opinion and people think they can know everything about me. People have the audacity, Deb, to tell me that I've never experienced racism because I think like this. That's the insult. Like, how dare
that's
you?
Interesting, because in this country, they would tell you that your disagreement is evidence that you have experienced so much racism that you've internalized it. You ate it. It's eaten your soul.
I've had
and now you're like, and now you're just this robot automaton who's being mechanic, like you're being moved by this invisible hand of white people. Whiteness. Whiteness is in you.
It's in me. I've been blessed.
You're possessed.
Yes.
It's today's version of, where they would say like the Salem witch trials and all this, and oh my God, they're possessed. Mm-hmm. And, they would say that to anybody who had any knowledge or curiosity about anything. Mm-hmm. And here you are, and you're like, no, I don't accept everything at, face value that you tell me because of the color of my skin. And they're telling you you're possessed by whiteness. Like it's Satan.
I'm disillusioned, I'm ignorant, I'm everything. And they can't understand that it's because of my experiences that I can unashamedly say without flinching that racism is not the biggest problem a Black person has faced. Because though I may have encountered racist situations, though I may have, emphasis on may have, because it's not also by default that any person that's not white will always face racism, but that's another topic for another time. So though I may have faced these things, and yet I can still be like those women who were interviewing you.
I would love to tell you that was the worst kind of abuse that I've ever suffered or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's not. And I would still maintain that for the average person, the average Black person, that whatever they've experienced that was overtly racist probably was still not the worst thing that has happened to them. No. And I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying, for example, in my life, whether it was, my mother who was literally abusive, to people I've known in my life who were narcissists and were exploiters and manipulators and did terrible things. Mm-hmm. I would rather somebody point a finger at me and call me some racist name any day of the week. I'd rather they not hire me. I'd rather they say, don't come in my restaurant. Like that is the kind of thing where I'll be like, all right, I'll go to the next one. Like that's a problem I have for like today for maybe a little while. And then I'm like, all right, I'm out. But when somebody decides they're going to make it their business to consume you, to like love bomb you in and manipulate you into being dependent on them or being, believing in them. And then they're going to like bleed you dry of your money or your empathy or whatever it is you have to offer, leaving you at the end of a year or 2 years or however many years, like this hollowed out husk of a person with PTSD, not trusting anyone because you've just been, used. That is so, so much worse than round up every person who's ever leveled some anti-Semitic remark at me. And there've been plenty, especially in the last month. And I'll take that any day of the week over some of the stuff that's been done to me with a smiling face and the name of my own good and all this other stuff. And I don't think I've had it half as bad as people right now in this country who are being sold a bill of goods about what's in their best interest and their children's best interest. That simply isn't. It's the exact opposite.
Well,
it will ruin them. It will ruin them.
But that's what I'm saying, is what is making them believe that microaggression of someone saying, oh, I don't like your hair, for example, like you can see my hairstyle is new. And someone sent me a DM, I put it on my story saying, oh, I love your hair, but in a non-racist way. I put it on my story. It was so funny. But let's say I'm not me, I'm not Ada, and that can ruin my day. Why? How? Like, what is the difference? Why? And because, like, you asked me if I believe them, that comment, even though it's just silly or random, can read. And this is someone who follows me. This is someone who eats at my words, if I can say that. But maybe, I don't know, they have a screw. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. But why is it that I can only mention it now to make a point and I don't think about it? I actually find it so hilarious. And why is it that for someone else, that can be the worst thing that has, why do they, let's use the word, internalize that? Going back to George Floyd, I saw it in the UK as well, Oxford students, you know Oxford, right? They were allowed to miss exams and things like that because of the trauma of the George Floyd incident. And that pissed me off. I'm sorry. That really grated me, because I've been to university and I remember just some hard moments at university. And I said, I'm sticking it through. I'm going to everything. I'm not quitting. And you want to tell me that because of something that happened thousands of miles away in America, you're going to excuse some people from taking an exam because of racism?
Yeah, that's why I said, like, I'm struggling to believe. I mean, like you said, there's probably a few individuals who have it that bad, but I think some others, the vast majority, are just, they're kind of like, oh, what can I make of this? Because we live in a world now between social media, all the mass media that gives you the dopamine rush of instant validation, instant like you're important, you're an influencer, you're somebody. That has a powerful effect on especially young minds. They very quickly learn, you can see it happen to children almost in real time. They very quickly learn how to get more of that, like a little drug, how to flip the switch and get more, and what that's going to happen if they do less. And so the incentives are in the wrong place. If you want integrity, or if you want people to be self-reflective and personally responsible, the incentives in terms of where we get our pleasure, like everything is about, and every decision that humans make, I'm told, is ultimately a function of our, hierarchy of needs, right? And so, you've got pleasure, pain, survival, all of those things. But if your survival is basically taken care of, and in the United States in particular, it really, for the most part, for most people, it is. Most people, relative to the rest of the world, are privileged, regardless of their skin color, in the sense that they have food, they have shelter, they've got oh, did we freeze? We froze. Okay. Are we back?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're not there. It's sort of like a luxury view to have all of those needs taken care of. So now, like, where are you going to derive that kind of rush or that sense of accomplishment? Well, you're going to get it from the approbation you get from these little virtue signals that you're
Mm-hmm.
giving and like I said, I think people will experiment. I think that there are people who'll be like going along and they'll agree with something that, you or I might agree with, and then they'll be beset by a mob, or their
Yeah.
friends will be like, I am so disappointed in you that you could think, oh no, I didn't mean it. So like they quickly learn, I'm not allowed to say any of those things, but if I say these things, I will have friends and I will be
Mm-hmm.
loved and I will have, the good stuff. And what made them particularly susceptible to that in terms of their personality, I cannot say. Chances are it's a combination of nurture and nature. There are just some people who are more sensitive and care more what others think of them. It's kind of like it's in their DNA a little bit, but then that can be exacerbated by your upbringing. If you grow up with parents who are very much, conscious of outward opinion and so forth, that will make you more so. I guess my privilege in life is that I, had my primary parent for most of my teen years as well as my dad, who absolutely was like me on steroids as far as not giving a damn
Mm-hmm.
what other people thought. Like that was definitely the last thing on your list when you thought about what should I do in this
Mm-hmm.
situation, A or B.
Mm-hmm.
What someone else I don't even know is going to think about it was like, why are you even contemplating that at all?
Mm-hmm.
And I would be laughed out of my house if I were ever to say to my dad, well, people will think, I mean, literally, I would be laughed out of my house and be like, don't even come at me with that. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So that was drummed into me from such a young age that you don't measure yourself against other people's opinions. And you definitely don't measure it against people you don't even know. Like
Yes.
total random strangers you haven't even
Yeah.
met, you're never going to talk to. That
Yeah.
that he would have told me to go find another place to live because I'm no child of his. That would be the argument.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what makes that person like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets reinforced and reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. And by the time they get to be your age,
Mm-hmm.
they're just a giant raw nerve, as far as this stuff goes. So when I say I don't believe them, I don't necessarily mean they're all consciously lying.
Mm-hmm.
I just mean I think it's an inauthentic pain, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's
It
like
makes,
they believe it in the moment. It's like
but
it's part of their identity. But if you were to measure, if there were a way to electronically measure or chemically measure whether them against a real sufferer of trauma,
yes.
you would see that like they wouldn't even move the needle.
No.
It's a cerebral thing. It's like this is my identity that I
Mm-hmm.
am, right? It's not coming from in here.
Of
That's my
course.
take.
I believe that. I also think that they really believe. Like, for example, I watched today a video about something else, and it's that similar mindset of an anorexic girl, for
Yeah.
example. She
Mhm.
really believes she's fat.
Mhm.
Like she really believes she's fat.
Yep.
That's the same idea. I understand what you mean about inauthentic, but it's not inauthentic for them. They really believe what
So
they
it's a
are.
distortion. So it's a distortion.
Yeah, for
I guess
some,
that's I guess that's what I mean. It's like a
yeah.
dysphoria. So you have people who have like gender dysphoria,
Mhm.
body dysphoria, and then it
Race
feels like
dysphoria.
people have like, what would we call this? Trauma
Race dysphoria.
dysphoria.
Well, that's the thing, but I also think it comes from what you mentioned. It's a drug. Like, for example, for you just have, when you were talking, I was just thinking to myself, people just have to change their drug.
Yeah.
In the sense of, for me, what really makes me feel accomplished and satisfied, I don't know why. Like you said, it's because maybe upbringing, I don't know. It's a combination of things for me. Maybe it's because I know what I have been low. I'm not going to talk about everything in this YouTube, but I have been in really dark moments, like many other people. But those, I don't want to feel that again. I don't want to go back there in
No.
any way, shape, or form, and I don't want anyone to make me feel in a way that I'm there. That's why I don't like when people tell me I'm oppressed, because it's almost, I don't want to go back to those dark moments. So
Yep.
my drug is not that. I don't want to be coddled. I don't want to be felt sorry. I don't want that feeling, because I got that when I was in a dark place, and I don't want anything to do
Well, it's
with that. So,
disempowering. It's like once you realize,
mhm,
like once you get that realization, and it really is a realization, and it's sort of like an emotional learning to ride a bike.
mhm,
And once the aha moment hits that when I change my mind, like when
mhm,
I decide that I'm not going, that this isn't me, that
mhm,
this isn't good for me, that this isn't how I want to think, and I begin to feel better,
mhm,
and I have power I didn't have a minute ago. Like I have all this wellspring of power. I just have to
mhm.
access it, you know? Um, once you know that you can do that, it's what how cognitive behavioral therapy works, where
Yes.
you kind of learn the thought processes to kind of reason your way back into reason, right back into
Mhm,
rational thinking.
mhm.
It is, I won't say it's impossible to go back, but it's not a place you want to go, because
It's not.
not only have you been there, and that's why there was the necessity for the change in thinking process, but you also are keenly aware of how distorted it is.
Mhm.
So why would you volunteer? It's like saying, I think I'll go break my leg again.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Like you've
Yeah.
healed.
Yes.
So
Accept that.
yeah. And it doesn't mean you never feel pain again. It just means like, I'm not going to willingly regress
Yes.
to a place I didn't like when I was there the first time.
But you
And
see, you see, look, some people, let's say, have had, or let's say, have interpreted or taken a racist situation as it's traumatic. And also, some people have faced real traumatic incidents in relation to racism. And maybe they've passed it on and passed it on and passed it on. But let me just say something, because you mentioned about breaking the leg. And I just think of two people who've been sick, like terminally ill, and they've both recovered. Stay with me. One of them, that that sign of recovering is like a new lease of life for them. They have a different attitude, a positive attitude. Wow, I survived.
right.
They don't remember that they nearly died. However, you have the second person, that's all they remember. They're so afraid of living because they're afraid to die. Does that make sense? So I think
100%.
there's two,
Absolutely.
you have these kinds of people. You have people that doubt that I've experienced racism because of how I talk about it. But let's say I have experienced it and I know how it was, but I know I overcame it. And wow, I overcame it. I, like you said, you hit the nail on the head. I have so much power because I never really believed racism was the biggest issue a black person could face anyway. But because the media, family, culture is saying it is, and I overcame that, there's such a power, I feel. Wow, this big bad system I was able to be or go through. It's so empowering. Whereas other people, it's not. It's
Right.
disempowering. So it's how you interpret the.
Well, I think that you'll also always have, and I think it was Booker T. Washington? I can't remember who said
I
it,
love him. Yeah.
but that you'll always have those people
Mm-hmm.
who see that there's something to gain in victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's financial gain or
Mm-hmm.
psychological or emotional, it's like a crutch, if you will. And so, and I don't remember how he put it. It's just, it was more like, you're never going, just like you'll always have hardened racists, like there'll always
Mm-hmm.
be some people on the planet who are just, there's no winning them over,
Mm-hmm.
to the side of reason.
Mm-hmm.
But you'll always have people on the other receiving end
Mm-hmm.
who are looking for it around every corner, and
Mm-hmm.
have and believe, absolutely believe, just like you and I believe that there's sort of personal power in rejecting all of this nonsense, who see it the opposite way,
Yeah.
who do not want to let it go for
Mm-hmm.
anything. It's kind of like, if I let this go, who am I? If I let this
Exactly.
go, what's my excuse?
Exactly.
It's sort of like a form of imposter syndrome or whatever, that, if I never start, I can't fail.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of thing. And I think you'll always have that. The difference that I see now is that has spread like a metastatic cancer, and it's kind of consuming everybody, and it's being
Point.
proactively taught as a desirable way to think to young children.
That's the
So
point.
like that's kind of where I come in on the whole conversation with the channel, with everything I'm doing,
Mhm.
is to say, hey, you adults want to go mess up your lives and think like poorly, just have poor thinking processes and mess things up. And then you come into my lawn and I'm going to make sure you get off my lawn. Like, we're adults, we'll deal with it. But when you take a small child, especially if you're put in a position of public trust, like a public school teacher, you're a special kind of evil, and I'm just not going to tolerate that. I'm going to expose it. And even if I don't believe that you are willfully evil, because I don't believe that most teachers are, I think they are misguided. I think many of them are also brainwashed and were poorly educated themselves. They're stage 1 thinkers, all this. But I'm still not going to let you do what you're doing without challenge. You might think you're being well-intentioned, but it's not coming out that way. You're actually doing real harm. And so I won't back down. I just won't. If there's a child involved somewhere, I'm not backing down. And that's where, I get into trouble, because people will say, well, what's the harm? Or why are you so hyper about this? And I turn around and I say, I would like you to explain to me how you know this is harmless. In the sense that if you go into a room with a child, especially whether it's your child or not, and you're spending an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever a day, teaching that child about the world, about anything, basic skills about the world, whatever, you have an obligation, in my opinion, to do no harm. Even if what you do is neutral or not that awesome, like even if you were not successful at teaching them something constructive, you cannot destroy something, least of all their burgeoning self. And I would like to ask these people, like, okay, you're telling me I'm hyper about it. Explain to me how you know this is helpful. And if it's not helpful, then why are you doing it? Because it doesn't connect to a basic skill. You say you're teaching about life. You say you're teaching about feelings, social, emotional learning. Okay, well then presumably you think it helps. Explain how the mechanics of that. How does it help the child to be told they're a victim? I'll wait. I'm waiting. It's like, I'm still waiting. I have yet to have anybody answer that question for me. And they'll say, well, critical consciousness, and they can't be liberated until they're aware of their own oppression. I'm like, if you're not aware that you're oppressed, if you're not aware of it and you don't feel oppressed, and we look around and we say, okay, there are no external sources of oppression. There's no literal shackles or walls or cages. And the person doesn't feel oppressed. They feel perfectly free. Nothing's inhibiting them. They're not even considering that. Why do you want them to be conscious of some other reality that they are not aware of? And they don't have, they say, well, they can't be free unless they do it. Like, but they are free. They feel that they're free. Oh, but they're wrong.
Yeah.
They're duped. And it's like, what if you're wrong? Like, what, you can't show me what it looks like. You can't quantify it. You can't measure it. You can't even replicate it. Like, you can't say, it takes this form here and look, it's over here also. You can't do that. So how do you know you're not the one living in a fantasy land? They can't answer it. They can't answer. I always ask, how do you know? We need to do how do you know? No answers. So, I mean, when I say I don't believe them because what they're espousing, it goes even past faith. There's more evidence, in my opinion, for like the resurrection of Jesus than some of the things that they're saying are the truth.
Of course.
And I'm like,
Jesus knows.
but what I'm saying,
I get you.
But you get what I'm saying? Like, there is actual documented evidence of witnesses and things of that nature that when, people can say, whether you believe it or not, there is evidence. It's just a question of whether you find that to be, quality evidence. But what they're preaching doesn't even have that. Like, it doesn't even have, 2,000 years of history of all kinds of people with testimony, and that. No, it doesn't have that.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's because it's a feeling culture now.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about how we feel, and there's a lack of thought anymore, and there's a lack of respect. Right. For me, critical race theory does one thing, and I don't even mind so much about telling you're oppressed or this and that. The thing I mind the most about is that they are robbing the opportunity for these children to have their own unique experiences. You know,
Right.
that's it for me. Because the thing is, we tell children a lot of things, right? And then they kind of grow up and they see, no, it's not true. It's true. They're always confirming or rejecting beliefs. But critical race theory and this ideology, this school of thought, is so pervasive. It's just so, they're doing it in such an aggressive, manipulative.
Oops. What happened? She got kicked off. I don't know what's going on. I just want you guys over there in the comment section to know I've been like eyeballing the back and forth here, and I'm not going there. Like, no. Just, Jordan and company, you guys are a lot braver than I am. If I jumped in there, I would never, it would not go well. So yeah. Okay. I wonder what happened. Does anybody have any questions for Ada that when she comes back, because I'm sure she will come back, that she can answer? Anybody have anything? No. We're going to wrap this up pretty soon. Oh, her battery died. It was the battery. I just got a note. I wonder. Huh. So, anyway, I really appreciate everybody coming, but like I said, it looks like you guys have had like a separate conversation going on the side while we've been chatting. Very interesting, but I look at it from what little I've seen as more evidence that we're going in the wrong direction as a culture if people are thinking that the solution is to go backwards and assert racial identity. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that's the direction we want to go. And when I was talking to her before about what I read on Twitter, I found it. It was successful abolition of that identification with race was the goal of a just cause that bore fruit. It is progress to be celebrated, not a privilege to be enjoyed. And I just think that's perfectly states it, because yeah, she's going to come back, because it's progress. That was the whole point. The point was to get better. The point was to do better, not to hold on to these grudges and differences. And I don't think it serves any purpose. Now, that said, it is the United States of America, and I do believe in freedom of association. And if there are individual people who simply they would prefer to go form their own little area, buy some land, live amongst people who look like them and share all their cultural affinities and so forth, and say, leave us alone and, whatever, it's their business, as long as they leave people alone and they don't decide that that has to become the law of the land, or that everybody else has to live the way they live. I have a serious problem with that. But I'm not going to tell other people what they should think or feel or believe, as long as they keep it to themselves. I'll disagree. I'll say, I'm sorry for you and your kids, and I don't think it's healthy, but don't mess with me or mine, and we'll be okay, because that's the beauty of this country, is that you can do that. All right, here she is again. And you're back.
Hello.
I was like sitting here going, I got nothing. I don't know what. I found the thing, though. I read it to everybody, but I'm going to read it again, because
what thing?
The thing on Twitter that I found about the identity, it said, successful abolition of that identification with race was the goal of a just cause that bore fruit. It is progress to be celebrated, not a privilege to be enjoyed.
Interesting.
And I was just saying to everybody that if people want to still identify with their racial sort of heritage, culture, etc., like in a private setting, or even go and start a town, like, it's like, if that's what they want to do in a free country, but they're not going to like force things on other people. I certainly can't quibble with that. That's what freedom is. You have
Mm-hmm.
freedom of association. I get upset with people when they say that's how it should be for everyone.
I think that's the problem with anything, which is what I was going to say. I don't mind, neither do I care, with all respect, how people feel. And that shouldn't be a controversial thing to say. I don't care how people feel. I don't mean that in a horrible way, but we have our own little worlds to take care of. I can't, contrary to what put my headphones back in, contrary to what social justice warriors believe, we can't all take on the whole world on our shoulders.
No.
We can't. So I'm not going to worry about how the whole world feels. And people don't need to worry about me either. And I think this whole thing of this is how I feel, so this is how everyone feels, is just completely disrespectful. And it's so funny because postmodernists, anyway, they don't believe in an objective truth. And yet they seem to be creating new objective truths for us to all be bowing down to.
Well, true. And I've been trying to do you have a theory? Like, I have a theory, at least in America, about why it is that, I can kind of understand why it's going that way in the culture, but it's the politics are following in terms of the people in power at the moment are all in on this. And I've been, for a while, I've been like chicken, egg, like trying to figure out. And so my working theory is that when populism took hold in America with Trump is sort of a symbol of populism. And people say he was a cause. I think he's an effect of a long line of things that were happening, moving us towards sort of globalism and away from, I don't want to use the word nationalism because it has a connotation of like, we're, the state, our state is like the best thing ever for this country, which I don't think Americans ever wanted. I think it's more just America, the idea, America, the creed, as we were separate and we were unique. I think we were moving far away from that and towards this globalist, global citizen, open up the border, like everything, not just for people to emigrate here, but like, just come on in, anybody, like it became like a blurring of the lines of who are we anymore. And even going so far as to, and we suck. That started back even in the late 80s of, we hate ourselves. Yeah. America sucks kind of thing. So I think that Trump was sort of a reaction to that, where people who disagree with that premise are like, no, we don't suck, make America great again. So that they were sort of looking for somebody who would just speak the words that they were thinking about their country. And there he was, he kind of like came up because of that. And I think it was a sign to the people who want the global thing, who want this new world or whatever you want to call it. Okay. That they were sort of in trouble, that they'd been on the steady march of what they call progress. I don't, but steady march towards, changing America. And suddenly it was like, dink, like big interruption. And I think they freaked out. And I think what we're seeing is something that is, they leveraged, which was something in the culture that was part of the march, that kind of march towards socialism, communism, globalism, whatever you want to call it. And they said, ooh, we can use this to get our power back, our being the state, like the almighty state, the big bureaucratic monstrosity eating the world. And having harnessed it, they kind of can't let go. Now they're like, but they're trying to use it. And that the way that they're thinking they're going to use it, so they're cynics, I think, is, well, we'll just maximize the divisions, because if we maximize the divisions, then none of these groups that we have nurtured with all our special interest pandering can come together and be strong enough to get rid of us. So at the end, when the dust settles and everybody's, whatever happens, we'll still be in charge. We'll still be in power. The elite will still be up here in our little gated, protected communities with our bodyguards and everything. And and everybody else, it'll be like another Latin American third world country, but
Mhm.
we'll still be in charge. Like
Mhm.
that's kind of my pet theory as to why they're doing it. Do I believe that somebody like Biden or even Harris or any of these people like sincerely believe in critical race theory? No, I don't.
Mhm.
I don't believe that. I think they are just using it to separate us and keep us divided so we don't pay attention to all the ways they're robbing us blind
Mhm.
financially
Mhm.
and reordering the world around their friends and their, the people that they
Mhm.
prop them up and give them power.
Mhm.
And people don't want to believe it because, when I say this, it sounds like this giant conspiracy theory, but we have history. There's history of when people have done this. It's
Yeah.
not like it's not some crazy movie plot. This
Mhm.
kind of stuff has happened. It just so happens it was like 100 years ago that it happened,
But it's the same
but it
thing.
has happened.
It's the same thing. And I've said that before. Look, that's why I don't buy into this whole all white people are evil and racist. It even tries to happen here as well. And it's like, if you have to understand, or people have to understand, we're all in the same boat. There's literally two groups, elites and us.
Correct.
And the same way, everyone, they're trying to make one group the enemy. It's going to be so easy tomorrow for your group to be the enemy.
Right. And
So
if you're part of a population in the United States, it's like 14% of the population.
yeah.
Then
So
I mean, I would go read some Manning
mhm,
like now
mhm,
and wake up to the reality that if they're successful, by they I mean the people in power right now, the power
mhm,
elites,
mhm,
people who look like you are not going to be in a good place
yeah.
because by sheer numbers, still people's like, oh, white people are going to be the minority. Yeah, but that's not the case yet.
Mhm, mhm,
And and still the Hispanic population is larger than the Black population. And then you have
mhm,
Asians and you have Pacific Islanders, you have Indigenous, you have
mhm,
all the different minorities. But the fact of the matter is you still have 60%
mhm,
that look like me. And if you go down that path towards identitarianism
mhm,
and so forth, and instead of looking for, whereas you said, it's like we the people against them the state.
mhm,
And if we don't figure that out in a big hurry,
mhm,
um, it's going to be bad. It's going to be
yeah.
really, really ugly. And I just wish people would remember that it is that way. That it is. And I think for all of his flaws, for all of the things that people hated about Donald Trump, the one really good thing about him that I liked was he did seem to have a knack for
Mhm.
pulling people together who would otherwise not have been together.
That's the point.
And I think that's what people, people who were quote unquote walked away or said, I'm not doing this anymore. That's what they wanted. They were like, what I'm looking for is America.
Mhm,
I'm like not miracle like they make fun of us, but I'm looking for the American creed that we are all in this together. We're all created equal, and we're all like, you're my brother, you're my sister, and like I don't care what you look like, and I don't care where you come from, and you want to mind your own business. You want me to mind my own business. We could be friends. Like that's kind of what I took away from it. Not some everything they wanted to make it seem ugly. It was the exact opposite. It's like every time these people speak, they are saying the opposite of what is true,
mhm.
the polar opposite of what is true. And it's painful. It's literally painful. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it except keep talking about it. And that's not really very effective.
The thing is, there's strength in unity.
Mhm.
And I think more than strength, there's clarity in unity.
Yeah.
When you're divided, when everything's divided, you can't think straight. There's no clear thinking. And also, there's no one coming together, like you said. No one's talking. Everyone's just judging each other and saying, well, you're there, I'm here. Or better yet, going back to the race stuff, just listen, I speak. So there's not even that dialogue anymore or trialogue or whatever. There's just a monologue of one group speaking out, and no one is, just recycling thoughts within groups. So
I
there
just
is.
I don't think a country can remain united if the civic virtues and the the shared values, that are just public. And whatever you're doing in your private life, that's your business. But I'm saying if the civic virtues are not shared, then I think you're just a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
I don't see how we get out of this hole unless we can agree on certain basic fundamental things, like, for example, that property owners have rights, that you don't get to just go steal because you need something or you claim to need something. No, it doesn't work like that. That we as a society frown upon that to the point of you will be arrested and bad things, it will come from it in your life if you steal. If we don't even agree on that anymore. We don't agree on what free speech ought to be. There are lots of people in this country right now that say speech should be much more strictly, controlled.
Here as well.
And some speech should be compelled. And this is, as I said, at my age, half a century old or whatever, I mean, this is completely foreign. I feel like I'm in the Matrix movie. It's so bizarre to me. If you were 20, it might be a little different because you're sort of just getting used to the idea of freedom of speech and somebody wants to take it away. But for me, I've had it my whole life. It's just like, what? And, those two things, property rights are selfish and bad, and freedom of speech is dangerous. And then when we add to it, and your health should be dictated by other people.
Yep.
And now you're owned. Now, forget it. What else have you got? You can't express yourself freely. You can't come and go freely. You can't decide what goes inside your body without the state, telling you to or whatever. And, you can't own anything. You can't own anything and feel like you actually own it. At any moment, someone could come and take it away from you. So you are effectively a slave.
Well, that's where we're heading, isn't it? Yeah. And I personally don't think that it's going to change, in my opinion. I just think with social media, it's impossible now because, I was listening, I forgot who I was listening to, and they were just, and also because I'm Christian, I read the Bible, I know how it was in that time anyway. And it's like for someone to tell a story, it would be one person telling a story to kind of a mass group of people. Right. And for you to know the story, you had to be there. There wasn't no reproduction of that. And now you can have a story regurgitated thousands and thousands and thousands of times, and it can reach billions of people at once. How that's just the most effective way to ironically sow division. Ironically, because in that time, though you were telling a story to a mass group of people, they're experiencing it sort of in one time, in one space. Whereas after we log off this live, you're in America, I'm here, and someone could send mass information that reaches you, reaches me. We're participating in that individually, but together. So you have all your life experiences, your own personal ideologies. It's just grounds for division with social media. So as great as social media is, I think even something like Twitter, the things that are trending daily, it's not things people are purposely trending. It's literally the CEOs or whoever saying, what do we want people to argue about today? And it's making it seem like it's us that want to talk about it or argue about it or care about it.
Because it ultimately serves the people in power.
It does.
And that's where failing to educate young people is really going to hurt us in a couple years. I don't even give it a couple, because we've got just too many who don't know how to think, and they think certain things are true. Now, I say that, and then I'll talk to, for example, my eldest daughter's 17, and she'll tell me like her friends. And I hold out a little hope for Gen Z in the sense that I keep hearing that there are a fair number of them who know. We froze.
Yeah, I'm back.
And the fair number of them who don't take any of this seriously. And what I mean by that is they don't believe it. They turn, if they see anything on the news, they're like, yeah, they're full of crap. Like, in other words, they're so cynical that they're not susceptible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the majority, but it's a sizable number, I'm told.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hold out a little bit of hope that they, plus people in my generation, plus people from the prior generation, and sort of all together, we can somehow cobble together some kind of surviving remnant of liberty somewhere in the
Mm-hmm.
country,
Mm-hmm.
and rebuild, and that it won't die forever. The flame won't go out. It won't necessarily be the United States of America anymore, but maybe we can maintain some beachhead somewhere, in the hinterland, and kind of until what happens to all totalitarian civilizations is they crumble. They all
Yeah.
do. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
matter of time.
Yeah.
And so
And everyone will suffer, even those who it was meant to serve.
They'll suffer first.
Yeah.
That's usually history tells us they suffer first, because they're right there at the front of the line, going, "Can I have it now?" And they're like, "Here's your little crumb. Here you go. Here you go." And then they're like, "Wait a minute, I was promised." And of course, then they get up, they get their back up, and they get, because they're right up in the front, making their demands, going, I served. I did my revolutionary thing. Can I have my stuff now? And meanwhile, the rest of us that didn't expect it, we're like, we're gone. We're thousands of miles away. We're like, bye. Have fun getting your due.
It's scary.
So it is scary, but we do still have freedom of speech, which is what we're using right now. So that's, and then we just have to keep doing it. I'm going to use it and use it and use it and use it until they like put the gun right. Tell me
we have to
anymore.
Yeah.
It is a privilege that all of us who live in currently free societies have. When I say free, I mean, like, we're not literally going to be shut down from speaking right this second. So I'm going to keep talking until they tell me I can't talk anymore, or else, prison. And who knows, maybe even then. But thank you so much. I know it's late there, so I'm going to let you go, but thank you for doing this. Always. And I don't know if we turned over if we found anything, but at least hopefully the audience understands better some of the differences of the UK and here. I certainly do, and I appreciate it, because I thought that CRT was like big there, but I guess it's a little different. So
it is just hidden. Just don't talk about it too much. But it's not under the name of CRT, but there are definitely race divisions and race talks, and BLM is here, and we want to see what we can do with the children in schools. But it's definitely not, as I would say, blatant as well. Like with everything else, nothing is as blatant as America, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping it doesn't go there the way it is here. And, who knows? Maybe someday I'll have to emigrate to another country. Wouldn't that be funny? I'm looking at like Poland, maybe. Like, wouldn't that be hilarious? If like after all this time, my ancestors came from like Lithuania and Poland and places like that. Wouldn't it be funny if I ended up having to go back?
That would be funny.
After all this time. All right. Thank you so much. You have a great evening, and I will talk to you soon.
We'll speak soon. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Take care.